Yeah, I got your email, your message, Johnny. So I'm going to do that in a sec. Yes, I'll just fill you in on what Marcel was asking me. He was asking me why the word Hey Vav Aleph in last week's parsha is sometimes pronounced he as opposed to who, and it's extremely difficult because it looks exactly the same and you've just got to know which one it is. Two very difficult parashiot to read. Okay, Gemarah Sanhedrin. We will dedicate this shiur to the Aliyah of the Neshama of Rav Chaim Lipa Zev Rabinovich, Rabbi Lipa Rabinowitz, formerly of Manchester, who was the Rav of the Romanian Shul for zillions of years. I don't know how many years. Johnny, how many years was he there? 30?
About 35, I think. About
35
35 years. Yeah.
He was also the principal of the Jewish grammar school in Manchester for an equally long time. A very powerful man, short man, but a big man, if you know what I mean. Very powerful man, and he will be very sorely missed by everybody in Manchester and beyond. His father, by the way, Rav Gedalia Rabinowitz, was one of the founders of the Jewish Day School in Manchester. In fact, at one time, I don't know if it's still called that. At one time, it was called Beit Gedaliahu after him. I'm not sure if it's still called that now. It might be called something else. Yes, Reb Lipa, as he was universally known, was a great man, and he passed away yesterday. And we dedicate the shiur to his memory. And also we dedicate it to our good friend Leon, who's not feeling very well, and we wish him a refuah shalema. So a refuah shalema to Leon. Right, now, I have had a computer disaster in the last couple of days. Don't ask how. I pressed something I shouldn't have pressed, and I've lost a whole load of stuff off my computer. One of which is the Steinsaltz Gemarah, and I can't find it. And I tried to re-download today, and I can't do that either. So the screen that I'm going to share with you is not the usual Steinsaltz Gemarah. It is the Sefaria one. At least we can rely on Sefaria to actually have the words in the translation, but it won't be the familiar one because I've lost it and I need to try. I think it's in there somewhere, but at the moment,
Johnny, I can send you a copy if you want, because you remember you sent me the PDF.
Oh, that would be very handy if you could send me a copy of the PDF then, because my PDF has gone AWOL. According to my computer, Dropbox is syncing and it's got another 242 gigabytes, which is going to take about a month to do. So the Lord only knows where all my stuff is, but hopefully eventually it will come back. In the meantime, if you can send that to me, that will be excellent. In the meantime, we can make a start.
Yeah, I've
using.
got it.
Oh, you've got it already? Okay. Well, I'll just put the Safari up.
Yeah, I'll email it to you.
You email that to me, and I'll just put the Safaria up for the time being, and we can start. There it is. Okay, it's not as pretty as the other one, but at least you can see the words. Those of you who've got your own Steinsaltz, it's on page 44. Those of you who are in Art Scroll, we're on page 8B. If you remember, last week I left you with a cliffhanger. We had a discussion between Rebbe Meir and the Chachamim, and the dispute was about what the argument was, where they had one suggestion, which was Rebbe Meir, said that we start off a judgment for this defamer who said that his wife wasn't a virgin. We start off with 3 witnesses, and then it becomes 23 witnesses judges, if it becomes a capital case. And the Chachamim say that the court starts with 23 judges, and there was a discussion between Rava and Ula as to what their particular point was that they were disagreeing on. Let's just remind ourselves what each one of them said. Ula was the one that said what they're arguing about is whether we need to be worried about the rumor mill, the Me Too movement. So what Ula said was that maybe we need to be concerned that if this begins off as a monetary case because this fellow wants to reduce the wife's ketubah because she wasn't a virgin, that's a monetary case. But what we might be worried about is that when people hear about this, they may say, oh yeah, that's right, we know this girl, she's a bit of a lass, and we happen to know, we've got proof that actually he's right. She actually committed adultery during the period of betrothal of Erusin, and therefore that would turn into be a capital offence. So Ula says that's what the argument is about. Rebbe Meir says we're not worried about that, and if it does happen, so we'll then have 23 judges. The Chachamim say yes, that might happen, and so we better start off with 23 judges in the first place, in case it turns into a capital case through the rumor mill. That was Ula's view. Rava said, no, everybody agrees. Kule alma, everybody agrees. We're not worried about rumors. We don't need to worry that if we start off with a monetary case, somebody's going to come along and say, me too. I know that this woman was an adulteress. We're not worried about that, says Rava. What we're worried about is the kavod, the honor of the judges. If we have a situation where we have 3 judges, and then we need to go on to a capital case, and we bring in 23 different judges, people will say that the problem was these 3 judges were no good. And that's why we had to bring more judges and different judges. And that would be a slight on the kavod of the judges. So according to Rava, the disagreement between Rebbe Meir...
Johnny, why couldn't they have just brought 20 judges?
Because they have to be different type of judges. Monetary judges have got expertise in monetary cases, and other cases need different expertise. Okay. I've been in a case once here where I was a witness in a medical negligence case, and the judge was actually a commercial judge. I don't know why it was allocated to him. It might have been a mistake. The guy was totally clueless. It was like talking to a first-year medical student, and it was hopeless because he just didn't understand the whole concepts of what was going on. So it's very important that you've got the right type of judge. Right. So they were worried. Rava says that the Chachamim, who say that we start off with 23 in the first place, are worried about the kavod of the judges. That was the basic argument. Rava and Ula had different opinions as to what Rebbe Meir and the sages were disagreeing upon. And then we said, and at the end, right at the end of last shiur, the Gemarah, right, this is right at the top of page 8a. Let me just see if David's email has come through. No, not yet.
8b, I think, Johnny.
Did I say 8a? I meant 8b, yes. Top of 8b, the Gemarah then brings a challenge to Ulla from a Breita. Remember, a Breita was a sort of pseudo Mishnah. Didn't quite make it into the Mishnah, but it has a certain degree of power. There's a Breita that said that if he has a monetary case, he's tried by 3, and if he has a capital case, it's 23. And we said, now that's okay according to Rava. Remember, Rava was the one who says that we are worried about the kavod, okay? Because he says if he originally claimed only money, i.e. the husband said his wife's not a virgin, but he never said that he had any witnesses that to her adultery, in that case, we do 3. And then, however, if he originally said, I've got witnesses that she's an adulteress, well, in that case, it's a capital case to start with. If he originally claimed that he had witnesses, and therefore, even if he fails to produce any witnesses, and it turns out that it's no longer a capital case, but it's a monetary case, we do not dismiss those 23 judges and bring another 3, because that would be a slight to the honor of the judges. So that fits with Ulla. Is that right? No, we're all the way around. That fits with Rava. Rava, that's right, that fits with Rava. Rava is the one that says kavod. And there, this is where we stopped. Where are we now? Right, so that's okay according to Rava. Over here, up at the top, Ela la'ula kashya. But according to Ulla, who says the requirement for 23 judges is based on concern about rumors, kashya, it's difficult. How's he going to explain that? Because he can't say that, because he's worried about rumors, not about kavod. Now, listen to this. This is very interesting. That's where we got to last week. Now, Rava comes along and says this. Amar Rava, ani va'ari shebachabura. What's an ari? Anybody know what an ari is?
Lion.
A lion.
A lion, that's right. Ari is a lion. Same word as Aryeh. Okay, Aryeh is a very popular name. Ari is also a name. It happens to be the second name of my 3rd son. My third son, who's known as Bobby, his real name is David Ari. Long story why it's called Bobby. I won't bore you with it now. But his name is Ari. His second name is Ari, which means a lion.
My brother is Leo the lion, Johnny. My brother is Leo the lion.
So, very interesting, because this week I had a call about a bar mitzvah coming up in the shul, and I said to the mother, what's the name of the bar mitzvah boy? And she said, the name is Gur. Gimel Vav Reish, Gur. Not a particularly popular name. I'd never heard of that name before. So I said, oh, that's an interesting name, Gur. I said, where's that come from? And of course, Gur Aryeh, Yehuda Gur Aryeh. Yehuda is described as a Gur Aryeh, which is Gur is another name for lion. So Yehuda was named, Yehuda was described as a lion, the Lion of Judah. Okay, so Gur Aryeh Yehuda. So this family said to me they wanted to name the child after an uncle or a grandfather or somebody who was called Yehuda. But Yehuda, apparently in Israel today, is a rather old-fashioned name. It's a bit like us for England. We wouldn't dream of giving our kids the name Albert or something like that, because it's an old-fashioned name. Apparently, Yehuda, now Julia's shaking her head, but apparently Yehuda is a old-fashioned name, as is Aryeh. Gur, on the other hand, is a cool, modern, young name. So they chose Gur for this child and said that they were naming him after Uncle Yehuda or Grandpa Yehuda. Anyway,
Johnny,
that's Aryeh.
Johnny, I thought that Gur is a cub, like a cub, a young one of either a lion or some other big animal.
Yeah, I think that there is a translation of Gur as a cub. Also, Lavi is a lion cub, and Ari itself is also described in places as a lion cub. All of those things are names for some type of lion. Yes, David.
Yeah, no, it's correct. You refer to a puppy as a gur.
A puppy?
A puppy dog is called gur in Ivrit. So it is gur Yehuda is correct. What Sharon said, a young lion cub.
Yeah, so Gur Aryeh Yehuda. Gur is a cub, Ari is a cub itself, so is Lavi. Why did we get onto that? Because the Gemarah says... They
could have modernized Yehuda to Hudi.
They could have done, yeah. I would have told them if they'd have asked me. But I have to remember, Johnny, that Hudi is nearly 30. It's ridiculous, yeah. I know, but he is. So the Gemarah says, Rava says, Ani va'ari shebechabura, the lion of the group. What's he talking about here? The lion of the group. Targumine. What's targumin? What's targum?
Translation.
Translate. Correct, Marcel. Tirguminu, translated. In other words, he's telling us who is the lion of the group. Umanu, Rav Chia bar Avin. Rabbi Chia bar Avin was known as Ari Shebechabura, the lion of the group. It's interesting to know why he's called the lion of the group. What is a lion? The lion is the king of the jungle, right? The lion is the main man in the, you've all seen Jungle Book, and what's the other one? The Lion King. Yes, that's right, the Lion King. So the lion is the king. This Ari Shebechabura, one sec, Nachum. Okay. This is referring to Rabbi Chia bar Avin, who was the head of the group. And I'll tell you which group it is in a minute. Yes, Nechama or Nachum.
I'm curious about how in ancient times, how did they know about lions? I mean, they certainly hadn't been in the, you said jungle, and there's no jungles. Where did lions come about in ancient Israel, well, that they would be so prolific to see that it's something very important in the world?
Do you remember learning the story of Shimshon with us?
Wait, oh my gosh. Can you hold one? Oh my.
We'll just mute Nachum for the moment. Anyway, we'll answer Nachum's question. When we learnt Shimshon together, which we took 9 weeks about, if you remember, we have the story there of Shimshon battling a lion with his bare hands. Until the early 20th century, there were lions in Eretz Yisrael. The last known lion in Eretz Yisrael was in the very early years of the 20th century, 1904 or 5. So lions were well known in this part of the world, certainly at the time of the Gemarah in 500, and all the way up till the 20th century there were lions in Eretz Israel. If you would like to see the last known lion in Eretz Israel, you can see it stuffed in the Museum of Biblical Natural History, run by Rabbi Dr. Natan Slifkin in Bet Shemesh. And if you've never been there, then it is very, very well worth a visit. It's a tremendous museum. And in there, he has the very last lion that was captured and shot in Eretz Israel, and it is there on show for all to see. So the answer is yes, they were very familiar with lions, and they were very familiar with the fact that lions were the main animal in the group. Yes, Johnny? We
should do a teal there, a shul teal to the museum.
We did one.
To the museum?
Yeah, we did one a few years ago.
Oh no, the new museum. Though.
No, okay. We haven't been to the new one, but yeah, we did one to the.
I've been to the other.
If I remember rightly, and I've got it somewhere, there's a photograph of Rebbe Yisrael holding this enormous snake.
Yes.
At that teal.
Yeah.
Anyway, this Rabbi Chia Bar Avin is described as the lion of the group. Now, the reason that he's described as the lion of the group is that he was the head of something called Yarchei Kala. Has anybody heard, first of all, of those words Yarchei Kala?
Yes.
Yes, Johnny. What do you understand by the words Yarchei Kala?
If I'm not mistaken, it's a charity that supports poor brides for the wedding, provides the dress and the flowers and the Suda. If I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that would be a very wonderful thing, and that would be called Hachnosos Kala. But it is a completely different thing. It's not even the same color, which is something that I didn't know until fairly recently, actually. No, it's nothing to do with the color, but you'll have heard the words though, Johnny. I promise you'll have heard the words.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I ask David to explain to us, does anybody else know the origins or what that Yarchei Kala is? Okay, David, tell us.
I don't know what the origin is. It's mentioned in the Gemarah. It's study periods, which today is like a holiday study period. So they have, like in Chutz La'aretz at Hanukkah time, Yarchei Kala, or in the summertime after Tisha B'Av, Yarchei Kala. I think we had the words in Gemarah in Sanhedrin earlier.
Don't recall it, but you're absolutely right.
It's in the Gemarah somewhere, and I think the original Yarchei Kala was specific learning periods before a Chag.
Okay, you're absolutely right again, as usual. The Yarchei Kala that you will see advertised, and this is where Johnny Halpern will have seen it because they had it in his shul on a regular basis. The Yarchei Kala is exactly what David has said. When you are off work and you are in the Christmas holidays and people are not working, then it's an opportunity for you to do one of two things. You can either mess about and waste your time, watch the telly, go to the Christmas shopping sales, or do things like that, or you can use your time wisely and go to shul and learn. And what happens is that they provide, the shuls or the yeshivas provide learning facilities there during the holidays, and they put on special learning programs for those times of year. And it's called Yarchei Kala. Yerach means a moon. So if it's a moon, then we're talking about a time period. We're talking about a month. Okay. And Kala does not come from the word bride, as I also thought it did originally. It comes from the word Kehila, community. So it's a month. Originally, the Yarchei Kala was a month where the community would all come together and learn in great detail and in great depth. And it was a very special time of the year. It was done twice a year. David Marks is correct that it was done, and I'm talking about now in the times of the Gemarah, it was done in the month of Adar and in the month of Elul. So it was done in the month of Adar, of course, which is the month before Pesach, and it was done in Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah and all the other Chagim. And so that is the origin of it, and it was a big deal. The Yarchei Kala was a big deal. So when you now have your day's learning, this is inflation for you in the 21st century, because now what we do is we have a day's learning, usually on Boxing Day or something, where we all come together, and they call it a Yarchei Kala, and it's a day's learning. The original Yarchei Kala was what it said on the box, Yerech. It was a month. It was a month's worth of learning. Well, it's a bit like cricket, which started off as a 5-day test match, and now we're down to 10 overs a side. We've even 2020 has been cut down now to 10 overs a side because nobody's got any patience to last 5 days through a cricket match. And this is what's happened with the Yarchei Kala. Yarchei Kala has been suffered from inflation, and it's now only worth 1 day. So the day's learning that we call a Yarchei Kala is actually a complete misnomer, because a Yarchei Kala, a month of the community coming together, cannot be achieved in 1 day. However, it's rather nice that it's called a Yarchei Kala, because it's reminiscent. It reminds us of what went on in the time of the Gemarah, where people got together to learn. Now, the Yarchei Kala obviously has to have a hierarchy. And the head of the Yarchei Kala was a very important person. He wasn't quite as important as the Rosh Yeshiva of the big houses of learning in Pumbedisa and in Surah, all these big places in Babylon, and also those in Eretz Israel, in Tiberia. The Rosh Yeshivas were the top dogs, but the next top dogs were the Yarchei Kala leaders. And the lion of the group, Rabbi Chia bar Avin, he was head of the Yarchei Kala. And that is why he got his name of the lion of the group. Just to know who Rav Chia bar Avin was, those of you who've got the Steinsaltz Gemarah, it tells you a little bit about him under personalities there. I'll just tell you what it says. He was an Amorah of the 3rd and 4th generation. So that times him to the 4th century CE. So 300 and something. So it's the time after the Mishnah, but before the Gemarah has been written. So he is one of the main inputters, if you like, to the Gemarah. Rabbi Chia bar Avin, he was an Amorah, lived around about between 300 and 400. And Rav Avin his father was known as Rav Avin HaNagara. Anybody know what a nagar is?
A carpenter.
Carpenter.
A carpenter, that's right. A carpenter. So Rav Avin, his father, was a carpenter. And he was, according to the Gemarah, he was, or I don't know if it's from the Gemarah, but anyway, it's from somewhere or other. Rav Avin and his wife were very, very careful about the mitzvah of lighting candles on Shabbat. And as a reward for that, they were rewarded with 2 Talmidei Chachamim for children, one of whom was Rabbi Chia bar Avin. And that's who he was. He originally was from Eretz Israel, and then he went to Bavel. No, the other way around. He was originally from Bavel, then he went to Eretz Israel to learn further, and then he went back to Bavel later on in his career. So that's who he was, and he was the head of the Yarchei Kala, which was the month's learning program, which went on in Adar and Elul, and that's why it's called the Lion of the Group. Anyway, let's see what he's got to say together with Rava. So they explained, Rava and Rabbi Chia explained. They now give a completely different case of what this argument is about in order to explain the difficulties between Ula and Rava. Remember, way back when we first started, I explained to you that the Gemara's basic wish and desire is to avoid machloket. If they can find a common ground between the two seemingly opposing views, then the Gemara is deliriously happy. So if they can find a case that fits both Ula and Rava, then they will be very, very happy indeed. They don't like it where they have two rabbis who have differing views. What they try and do is to find a case where they can both agree on. Now, the case can be completely and utterly obscure and a bit convoluted. But if they find a case that the two sides can agree on, well, they're very happy indeed, and then they can move on to the next subject. So that's what we're involved in at the moment in this piece of Gemara, is we're trying to find a way, we're trying to think of a case where both opinions can sit without contradicting one another. So this is Rava and Rav Chia's attempt at finding that common ground. So, Hacha b'maya skinon. Let me see if David's email has come through yet. Yes, it has. Let me download that and I'll get you up the Steinsaltz Gemara. That was nice of David to send it to me. There we go. One second, it's only ready to load up now. Okay, there it is. Let me get it onto page 44. And then if I stop share and reshare, should be able to give you our familiar pattern there. There we go. Got it? Can you see the screen? Yeah? Yeah. Okay.
You're brilliant.
Why are we on page 20 and not page 44? That's no good. See? There we go. Right. So, Amarava, here we go. Now it looks more familiar to you, yeah? What's the case we're dealing with here? So, here we go. Here's another attempt at a different case. Shehevi haba'al eidim shezinta. The Baal, the husband, Hevi, brought eidim, witnesses, shezinta. Can you see the word zanut in there? Zanut is harlotry. Or as we said before, a ben zonah is the son of a prostitute. Who was described as a ben zonah in Tanakh? We learnt it. Who was described as a ben zonah, who became the leader? We in fact mentioned him in the Tanakh Shiur only last week. We mentioned him. Yiftach. Yiftach. Well done, Michael. Yiftach was a ben zonah. A zonah is a prostitute. So this husband, remember, this is the case of the defamer. The husband says his wife was not a virgin on her marriage night. The case, says Rava and Rabbi Chia, is that the husband didn't just say that she was not a virgin. He brought witnesses that she had committed adultery. Zinata means that she's been guilty of zinut, of harlotry, i.e. she has committed adultery in her father's house whilst she was betrothed to him, prior to the wedding, but after the erusin, after the betrothal. Okay, so now it's not looking good for this girl. The husband has got witnesses that says she did this act. Remember, witnesses in Jewish law have to be witnesses who saw the event. I explained to you, I think last week, hearing the event doesn't count. You have to have seen the event. In order to be guilty of a capital crime, you have to have witnesses who saw you do it, who saw you be warned, and we're going to come to that probably not this week, probably next week, about the warning. You have to be warned, and that warning has to be, do you know, or I am warning you that the act you are about to do is forbidden, and the punishment for that act is X. And then you have to, the person has to say, I understand that, I know that, and I'm going to do it anyway, and you can watch me. And so you can see that, you know, why it was said that any bet din that put somebody to death once in 70 years was a cruel bet din, because it's quite difficult to reach that bar, if you like, of proof. But here we are saying at this point that the husband brings witnesses that they saw an act of adultery between this husband's betrothed and another man. Okay, that's what this husband brings witnesses to say he saw.
This is dealt with in Sota in Daf 25.
How do you know that? That's very good.
Because I'm learning Sota at the moment.
All right, okay, well, I'll take your word for it because I'm not. But that's exactly what these witnesses are saying. So this woman, this girl, is in a bit of difficulty. However, let's read the next line. V'hevi ha'av, the father brings edim, witnesses, v'hezimum le'edei ha'ba'al. And they did something to the witnesses of the husband. So you've got a case here where the husband says, I've got witnesses that this betrothed of mine is an adulteress. And the father brings witnesses that says something different. What do these witnesses say? These second set of witnesses that are brought by the father in order to defend his daughter's reputation. What do these witnesses say? What does this word here, v'hezimum, mean? Does anybody know what edim zomamim is the title? Edim zomamim.
Have been bribed.
Johnny?
Is it bribing? They've been
bribing?
bribed.
No.
Conspiring.
No, it's not bribing. Any other?
To do with money.
Any other offers?
Is it to do with money though?
It's not to do with money. No, not to do with money.
Simum.
David?
Discrediting witnesses. So Adam Zomim, the case discussed here, is the second set of witnesses say that the first witnesses couldn't have done that act because we saw them somewhere else at that time.
Right, Bidyuk, exactly. Now, there are two ways that witnesses, the first lot of witnesses, can be discredited. You can have a case where witnesses come along and say, I saw this particular act occurred at this particular time on this particular day. And then another set of witnesses can come along and say, I was there at that particular time and that particular day. And I can tell you that what you said happened didn't happen. Okay, so you've got one set of witnesses that say something happened, and you've got another set of witnesses that say something didn't happen. That is called hachachasha. Okay, that is called opposing evidence. Where have you had that word, gentlemen who have davened this morning, have said that word? Or at least you will have heard that word if you went to shul, even if you didn't say that particular bit. Where have you seen that word before? Where it means to conflict. You've got two conflicting evidence. Hachachasha. Hachachasha. You'll kick yourselves when I tell you. All right, here you go. Ready to kick yourself? Okay, gentlemen, tell me if you've heard this. I can tell you for a fact that Jeffrey's heard it this morning. Oh, no, I don't know. He might have been late. Anyway, it says, "V'chein shetei chetuvim hamachachishim zeh et zeh ad sheyavo hakotov hashlishi v'yachriya beineihem yirotem u'fnei Hashem l'ganim revzenu sheyibana beit hamikdash v'meher b'meinu v'teich l'ganim v'toytek v'shem navodcha b'yirah kimi olam chshanim kabmoniot kadish derabanan." It's the end of Rabbi Yishmael Omer b'shlosh esrei midot nidreshet haTorah. Rabbi Yishmael gives us 13 exegetic principles, 13 principles how the Torah is worked out. And the last of those is, if there are two psukim that contradict one another, then the whole thing is put in abeyance until a third pasuk comes along and decides between them. So I'll translate for you. V'chein, and similarly, shnei chetuvim, two verses, ha-machachishim zeh et zeh, which contradict or conflict with one another. Ad sheyavo hakatov hashlishi v'yachriya b'neihem. It's put aside until the third pasuk comes along. In other words, has the casting vote. So that word hamachachishim, which is quite difficult to say because there's a chaf and a chet next to it, next to one another. Hamachachishim, we want to see it. It's right at the end of Rabbi Yishmael Omer, before Kaddish de Rabbanan, the first Kaddish that we say in davening. So you've all said that word before. It means to conflict. So Eidim hamachachishim are witnesses that conflict the evidence. So the first lot of witnesses say something happened, and the second lot of witnesses say, I was there and it didn't happen. And then you've got a problem, because you've got two witnesses, or two sets of witnesses, who are saying opposite things. That is not what we're talking about here. That's one way of discrediting witnesses. Another way of discrediting witnesses is the way David described it, and that's what we're talking about here, hezimum, edim zomamim. Now, what that means is, as David described, the first set of witnesses say, on Monday at 3 p.m., I witnessed this, or we witnessed, because it's got to be two witnesses, we witnessed this act of adultery. 3 p.m. on Monday, the 1st of April, we witnessed this act of adultery, and we heard the warning, and we heard that she'd heard the warning, didn't take any notice, and we witnessed the act of adultery. The second set of witnesses came along, and they are Eidim Zomamim. What they say, they don't say, we were there at 3 p.m. on the 1st of April, and we know it didn't happen because we were there and it didn't happen. What they say is, you two witnesses could not have possibly witnessed that act at 3 p.m. on the 1st of April, because at 3 p.m. on the 1st of April, you two witnesses were with us at the football match or in the supermarket or wherever. You weren't there. At that time that you say you were there and witnessed an act, you could not have done so because we are witnesses that you were not there, you were somewhere else. So you're telling me you witnessed this act at such and such a place. You were not there at that particular time that you say you were there, and therefore your evidence, not only is it wrong, it is evil. And Eidim Zomamim are one of the few people who are described by the Torah as Risha'im, as evil people. Now, there's a whole discussion as to why particularly Eidim who are witnesses who are discredited in that fashion are called evil, as opposed to the other type of witness who's just told a lie, or maybe they've been mistaken. When you have two conflicting pieces of evidence, it's possible that the one who's actually wrong may be genuinely wrong and may genuinely have thought he's seen something and he hasn't. But somebody who says, I was at a certain place at a certain time and I saw a certain act and he was not even there, that is a deliberate attempt to pervert the course of justice. And when you have a perversion of the course of justice, then the whole fabric of society is in danger. And for that reason, the Torah calls them evil. And now this tells you the depth of the Torah. It tells you the depth of the morality of the Torah. It tells you the sophistication of the Torah, that these type of witnesses who are proved to be witnesses who have lied about even being in the place are called Risha'im, they're called evil, because they undermine the entirety of society. Society, as we know, by our favorite prophet Zechariah, we know that the whole of society is based on social justice. There has to be a system where justice is seen to be done and where it is transparent. And people who seek to pervert the course of that justice are called evil. Let's have a look. I think it's worthwhile having a look at the psukim where Eidim Zomamim are described, to look at the language that the Torah uses for this. And it is, I wonder whether David knows this off by heart. Where is it, David? Can't hear you, you're muted.
Parashat Shoftim.
Can't catch you out. It is chapter 19 of Dvarim. I'll put it on the screen for you now. It is here. There we go. Ki yakum eid chamas beish la'anot bo sarah. If a false witness rises up against a man to bear perverted testimony against him, then the two men between whom the controversy exists shall stand before the Lord, before the judges and the Kohanim who will be in those days. And the judges should inquire thoroughly. And it turns out, Eid Sheker, Ha'eid Sheker ana ba'achiv. The witness is a false witness. He has testified falsely against his brother. And the Gemarah, the Chazal tell us this means Eidim Zomamim, the type of witness who says you weren't there. Then what happens to them? Va'asitem lo kasher zamam la'asot la'achiv. That's where we get that word Zomamim from. You shall do to him as he plotted. That's a good word. Plotted to do against his brother. And you shall remove hara, the evil, from your midst. So what happens is like this. You have a case that these witnesses come along and they say, I am a witness that on the 3rd of April at 3 o'clock, this act of adultery occurred between this man and this woman. Other witnesses come along and say, no, you weren't there, mate. You were somewhere else. You can't possibly have done that. And the court believed the second set of witnesses. Then the punishment that the first set of witnesses sought to apply to these innocent people, which would have been the death penalty, occurs to them. They get the punishment that they should have got. They got the punishment that they tried to give to somebody else because they plotted. Zaman, they plotted. So Eidim Zomamin, I suppose you would describe that, you translate that using this translation as plotting witnesses. What is somebody who plots? It's somebody who deliberately goes out to do something with preconceived mens ra and mens rea, and to have an evil intent to do something bad. And that's what these people are. And the punishment for them is whatever it is that they tried to impose on the other person, they get it. So if it's a death penalty, they get it. If it's a monetary thing that they're giving false witness on, they get the fine or whatever it is that's going on. And the Torah then says,
to the father? What happens to the father in that? If that was a case where the father said or the husband said his wife committed adultery, what happens to the husband under those circumstances? Does he also get the death penalty?
No, he doesn't. He does not get the death penalty because I don't know why. It's a good question. He doesn't get the death penalty. Only the Eidim who have, maybe it's because these Eidim have to swear, and the father has brought the witnesses, and the witnesses. I don't know. It's a good question, Michael. As far as I'm aware, with Eidim Zomamim, it's the witness. Oh, I'll tell you why. Because the father, you cannot appoint a shaliach to an aveira. Okay, you can appoint a shaliach, an agent, to do a mitzvah, right? I will be appointed, please God, on Sunday by my son as his shaliach to do the brit milah of his child. Okay, it's his mitzvah. I'll be doing it as his shaliach, as his agent. But what he can't do is say to me, right, I'm going to appoint you as an agent, go and steal something for me. If you go and steal it, it's your aveira, not his. You cannot appoint a shaliach to an aveira. So those Eidim who do this plotting, they are responsible for their own actions. Should the father also get a punishment? Well, I'm sure he will. He'll certainly have a punishment because
I'm thinking of the husband,
the
husband rather than the father we're talking about here.
I meant the husband. Yeah, the husband will, but he can't get the punishment Eidim Zomamin because he hasn't done that aveira himself. It's the aveira of being a zomaim, of being a plotter, of giving that false testimony under oath that you saw something, because it doesn't matter what the father says, it's got to be the witnesses who come along before this girl will get convicted. And the father cannot appoint him as a shaliach to do an aveira. I'm sure that's the reason why he doesn't get that punishment. Yes, Julia.
I find it quite difficult, really. There's no real reason why witnesses would scheme to give false testimony unless they were paid, presumably, and the only person who would be paying them would be the husband. The other thing is that I think it's a really interesting discussion, and everything that your observations are all very astute and interesting, but the context is very strange. Why this particular event, adultery, is not going to be seen in front of witnesses, especially witnesses that have said don't do it. I mean, the context is very odd. If it was a different crime, then it would make a lot more sense. But to use it, the whole discussion in the context of an adulterous relationship, which surely is going to be done in any event in secret, it's very difficult to appreciate why there is this discussion on the point.
Okay,
Johnny,
two answers on that. Number one, 1 second. Let me just answer Julia, please. Number one, you're right. It is strange. And remember, I said to you that some of these cases that the Gemarah brings to try and bring harmony between the opinions are very convoluted and difficult to grasp. And this is one of them, because, as you quite rightly say, this is unlikely to happen. And one of the complaints, in inverted commas, that many people have, especially young people, and I was one of them, when you're learning Gemarah without the maturity of age, is you have a temptation to say, "Oh, that's a load of nonsense, that," and that can't happen. Rubbish. Throw away the baby with the bathwater. But what it's doing is it's bringing, as I said to you at the beginning, it's trying to bring a case so that there is not machloket between the opinions. And yes, it is convoluted, and yes, the whole thing is a bit strange, but you have to put that to the side, because this is a theoretical discussion. It's a theoretical discussion to try and make the opinions of the two sides converge, because what we don't want is two Torahs. We want to try and come to a conclusion about the halakha, which we can then apply across the board. So it's about trying to find that common ground, even if that common ground is a strange case like that. That's number one. Number two is, you're right, the whole thing of warning and in public, etc. And that's why the Gemarah says there was very few capital cases ever, because the bar was just very, very high. So your observations are all correct, but they're explicable in the context of what the Gemarah is trying to do, which is to converge opinions, as to bring divergent opinions together. That's what the Gemarah is trying to do, and it does it by means of finding a case where they can both be satisfied. If you like, it's an exercise in compromise. Howard.
Well, I'm not really arguing with Julia at all, but she may remember, no, she won't remember except historically and from her legal education, that before the Divorce Law Reform Act of 1969, Divorce Reform Act 1969, one had to prove a matrimonial offence. And one of the grounds was adultery. And there were witnesses to the adultery who were dragged to court, who were usually the receptionist in the hotel and the room service guy who delivered afternoon tea or champagne and said, yes, I saw them in bed together. So it's not wholly impossible, but I do agree it's a poor example generally.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's very interesting, because if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, there were cases where a couple wanted to divorce, and the only way they could do it was to do this proof. That there would be sort of they would what's the word? They would collude together. The husband and wife would collude together to bring evidence of adultery, even if that adultery never actually occurred.
That's all right. That's all correct. But Howard missed the other requirement, which was that you have to notify the intended adulterers beforehand that you are committing a crime, and that's not what happened before the Divorce Reform Act, which was actually before my time, because I didn't start studying until 1969. But you need your requirement for the witnesses to advise against committing the act was certainly not something that would normally have happened.
Well, it was pretty widespread, Julia, but we won't argue the toss now.
How interesting to have lawyers on our group. Thank you both.
Well, I want to say this, my senior partner, Leo Absi MP, who changed the law from the matrimonial offence to breakdown of the marriage. So I do remember it quite clearly.
Johnny,
so
I was
vested interest. Okay, so well,
interest to disclose. Yeah.
Johnny,
Yes,
I was
go
going
ahead,
to chime
Larry.
in. I was going to chime in that the husband shouldn't be held responsible unless he could be proved complicit, because if two people come to him and say, I saw your wife to be engage in this act, he could have gone to the court totally innocent of any wrongdoing. And as to the two witnesses and Julia's comment that this is in some ways absurd, one of them could have been a rebuffed former suitor or with some other motive to try and destroy her reputation or cause this man not to fulfill his wedding commitment.
Thank you, Laurie. I think that's a wise observation, and I think it's a very modern observation. There's the revenge that scorned former lovers try and take on their former partners takes all sorts of shapes and forms. I'm told that the modern way to do it is revenge porn, but we'll not go into that. I've read about it. That's all I'll say. I've read about it. Yes, David.
Yeah, Marcel is learning SOTA at the moment. And one of the views that I've seen is the intention of the Torah is to preserve the sanctity of a Jewish marriage. And therefore you've got these, what appears to be rather extreme measures with the Motzi Shem Ra and the SOTA. So you've got to ask yourself why the whole ceremony of SOTA was phased out even during the temple period. And two answers that I've seen is, number one, as have been suggested by the lawyers, it was so difficult for a case ever to come before the Beis Din with a woman who's caught in the act, and there's witnesses, and the witnesses have given her a warning of what's likely to happen to her. Secondly, and this is rather disturbing, that because adultery was so rife in the time of the first and the second temple, they would never have had enough room to try all the women who actually did commit adultery during that time.
Wow, that is disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we thought that we lived in bad times.
But Jonathan, it was the bitter water that proved the point, not necessarily the witnesses.
No, we still have to do the ceremony.
Then she drank the bitter waters, and she either lived or died. If she lived, and she would be fruitful.
Okay, but you'll learn, Marcel, going through the Gemarah, that ceremony was hardly ever performed, and it was done. It was eventually done away with.
Yes, I know.
Okay, really interesting. We need to close. We haven't actually got the full case yet, but I thought it was interesting to show you the idea of Eidim Zomamim. Let's just summarize what we've done today. We've learnt about the two different types of conflicting evidence. We've learnt what Rabbi Yishmael was talking about in his 13th principle. We've talked about the need for witnesses, warnings, etc. And we've learnt that Eidim Zomamim, these plotting witnesses, are called evil because they are undermining society. And so we'll see what goes on with this case next week. Comments before we close? Howard has a hand up. Howard? No, he's not got a hand up. Anyone else? Johnny's got a hand up.
It's all about the money.
Are men ever accused of adultery in the Gemarah?
Yes, men, if they commit adultery with a married woman, Eshet Ish, they are also Chayev Mita. Both the Noef and the Noefet. Both parties are Chayev Mita. If a man has a relationship with another man's wife. That is part of the 10 Commandments.
But the case we're doing now is
Commandment.
the case we're learning now is before marriage, isn't it?
Yes, this woman is not an Eshet Ish, but she is considered like an Eshet Ish because she's already been betrothed. And as we've explained, the betrothal process is part of the marriage. The marriage process is
what about him committing adultery before the marriage in the same situation?
Well, she can't be married to somebody else, can she? If he commits adultery with a married woman, then he's in trouble.
Right.
I want to apologize for having this telephone call interfere with the shiur. If it would have been anybody else, I would have just hung up, but this was really a very important call, and I apologize.
No problem. Don't worry about it. Okay. Yes, Howard's back. Have you got your hand up, Howard?
Yes, just to say, Johnny, that you said the husband wouldn't get into trouble as much as the witnesses because the witnesses give evidence on oath, but a complainant would have to do the same. So I don't see.
But he hasn't been. He's not saying that I was there at that time and I saw him. It's the zomaim bit, the plotting bit, that gets them the real trouble. I'm not saying he gets off scot-free, but he doesn't get the same punishment as the witnesses.
No, because I suppose he says I'm relying on the witnesses' evidence to make my case.
I never saw it. They told me they saw it. Now, it may be investigated that he's bribed them, etc., and then that's a different case altogether. But as it stands, the witnesses have come along, and as Larry said, the father may well be, the husband may well be the innocent victim in this whole plot, and these two witnesses may be scorned lovers or have some other kind of explanation for their bad behavior. I think that's a very, very valid point.
But what happened to the stained sheet?
This is a different case, Nachum.
Oh, okay.
We've moved on to a different case. This is an attempt by Gemarah to bring another case where we don't need that.
Okay.
All right, let's stop there. If you want to stop recording, if you have